Good evening, good evening, good evening. I'm Rukak. This is JMD Warehouse, and today I'm going to be discussing Cirrus TCG's new video. The first video on this particular channel, he's rather well known in some other sections of the internet, such as the politics streaming, and he is a VTuber. And I personally would love to be one of the first people to welcome him with open arms into our little corner of the world in the Magic the Gathering YouTube space. When I was watching his video, I noticed that he was saying some things through some rose-colored glasses about Magic. And so, as I thought that I would come into this with a good faith response to his video and explain the points that I think that he got slightly wrong and talk about the points that I think that he got very right. Alright, let's get started here. We're going to be starting and stopping a lot.
So I think it goes without saying that Wizards of the Coast has been a mixed bag recently. They've given us a 30-year anniversary celebration product that nobody
Let's hear
afford, and then given it to a whole bunch of multimillionaires who can afford it, and then made a $700 ticket for their 30th anniversary thing in Las Vegas. And of course, it comes with the anniversary packs and all that other fun stuff. It's been fun.
I'd like to start by saying, while I have some issues with Magic 30, the price isn't really what bothers me. I don't mind there being exclusive packs. I mean, they're not tournament legal, so you can't buy these to play with, although I'm sure a lot of people are going to use them as proxies. My issue with Magic 30 is that it's pressing a little bit too close to reprinting the reserve list for my taste. But if you go into like other trading card spaces, what is it? I believe that one of my friends who's more into sports cards was telling me about $10,000 booster packs for baseball or something, football. I'm not sure. That's not exactly my forte, but having expensive booster packs is perfectly fine by me. And also sending them out to millionaires, while people say it's tone deaf, if you're trying to promote the product, especially for something this expensive, one of the best ways to do it is if you're trying to get people who are like someone who is a football fan and a Magic fan. And the football player in question, I hear, is actually a really cool dude. Apparently he's done some Magic the Gathering stuff in the past and has interacted with some Magic YouTubers. And apparently he's legit. So why not send out your product to these famous people so that your customer base who are also fans of that celebrity are like, oh, he has it, I need to have it too. I see why people have a problem with that. I just don't necessarily agree with it. I think that part is perfectly fine, and having proxies is perfectly fine. Selling your non-tournament legal stuff for $1,000, if you want to do it, let the market decide whether or not it wants it. I just wish they hadn't decided to press right against that reserve list reprint wall.
I want to go ahead and maybe go on a bit of a rant as to what's become of the game of Magic the Gathering versus when I was a kid, when I was playing it. And I know this isn't really going to mean a whole lot to most people outside of me, myself, and I, but
A little context that will be important later. I myself, my very first booster pack was Exodus. A friend of mine took me up to the store. We bought 5 packs. And in my very first pack, I pulled Recurring Nightmare. And in my third pack, I pulled Survival of the Fittest. And my friend's brother helped me build Rexer Slivers. So that was how I started. I've personally gotten to have in my hands a paper deck of White's Academy, the broken deck that used Tolarian Academy and Mind Over Matter and Mox Diamond to win on turn 1 or 2. Just go off and draw through the whole deck and play immediately. I've seen a lot of these controversies. I did take my break about the time that he was starting because I was so attached to Dominaria. Moving away from Dominaria gave me some pause, but I was brought back. And most of the stuff he's talking about, I've gotten to see firsthand.
I still want to go ahead and get my opinions out there. So, when I was a kid, when I started playing Magic, it was in Mirrodin block. That was, 2003. I started playing Elves. I learned very quickly that cards like Heedless One could close out games in an obnoxiously quick fashion. And I started learning how to play the game, not only with Elves, but with Affinity. I learned with very fast, very obnoxious mechanics that were overpowered for their time, as evidenced by the fact that they are still used today in the modern format. I then went in...
He's sort of right. Affinity does see some modern play, but as far as I understand, it's all but dead and doesn't actually use any Affinity cards anymore.
To the Kamigawa and Ravnica blocks, having quit the game for a bit in Kamigawa, but, quit as long...
That was the wrong Ravnica block.
As a kid normally would quit. Played in Ravnica for a while, and that's when I actually fell
Not that I'm going to hold that against him.
Its lore and
Still
everything,
cool.
As opposed to
I just thought that was funny.
Playing it every now and again when I had friends around me who played. And then I stopped playing again for a while, and started picking things back up around the time Ikoria was in Standard. Now, this may not mean a whole lot to players who are new to the game, or who have been established and never stopped playing, and so they got to...
Quick side note, he really likes playing and coming back for the most broken sets of all time. Mirrodin was so broken that people left the game, and we got Kamigawa that was as powered down as Mercadian Masks. And then comes back for Ikoria that completely just ripped the game, changed the game in ways that if you didn't play before Ikoria, you won't be able to understand. That it's not even the same game anymore after that.
Experience all of these things over the course of a long period of time as opposed to a sudden transition. But let me kind of juxtapose what the game was versus what the game is now to maybe give an idea of how much things have really changed and why I don't necessarily think it's for the better. So, back when...
I sort of agree with him on this, that the game has changed. I'm not sure if I say for better or for worse, but I do agree that the game has changed, just not for the reasons that he thinks that the game has changed.
I was playing as a kid, not saying that things were, better back when I was playing as a kid, but when I was playing back then, Standard was the format to play. If you played Magic the Gathering, you played what was called Type 2, and the Type 2 format is the equivalent to our current Standard format. It had our rotation. It is the thing that Wizards seem to put all their design know-how into, and for better or worse, it was Magic the Gathering. It's what you played, it's what you enjoyed. However,
And this is true. Like back then, unless you've been playing, like Mirrodin was a little bit later than me, but back in like 98, 99, when I was first starting, I was told if you don't have yourself at least a Moxen or two, don't bother playing anything but standard. Because everyone is going to be dropping their Black Lotuses on turn one, and you will never stand a chance.
there were always side formats to play. If you wanted to play with your legacy cards, you played Type 1 format. That was your unlimited format, and most people tended to stay away from it because it was considered to be the more overpowered format. Anything goes, so anything that Wizards had rotated out of the game naturally was out and gone, and you were not having to deal with things like, losing your turn to your opponent from cards that were stuck in Mirrodin block. Now, this had ups and downs. The other games that I played around the time were things like Yu-Gi-Oh!, the Yu Yu Hakusho card game.
And he's sort of right about Type 1 and Type 2. There was also, I believe, Extended would have started at about this time that he got into Magic. So there was also Extended that absolutely no one ever liked. It was Modern before Modern, for those of you playing the home game. So what Extended was double standard, but it rotated as well. So like how with standard you go 5, 6, 7, 8. I believe it was 12, 13, 14, if I recall. It's why you saw these weird extended decks that would play things like Psychotog and at the same time some of the more broken stuff from years past.
Duel Masters, games that didn't really have the same kind of rotation that I was used to here, at least not in any of the areas that I played. As a result, Magic was the game that had the stable competitive environment where power creep didn't affect things anywhere near as much, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Was the game that I was always going to have to keep up with, and lo and behold, I ended up playing more Yu-Gi-Oh! Growing up, but that's really not the case anymore, because I think that game's hit a point of critical mass. What I'm trying to say is, rotation kept Magic at a nice, even pace. Power creep happened, yeah, but it didn't happen to anywhere near the degree that I had experienced in other card games.
This is one of the points of contention that I have. People like to say power creep, power creep, power creep, but it's not that there's power creep, it's power shifting. See, when I was a kid, the creatures were crap. You didn't really play creature decks unless you had a good reason to. So, if you were like a good example, when I first got started, that was when Scred Red was getting big. And it played things like Iron Claw Orcs. Like this god awful, I think it was 2 mana 2/1 or 3 mana 2/2, something like that, that couldn't block things with its power or greater. But in exchange, you got to play Pyroblast, where you sacrificed 2 mountains and you dealt 4 damage. Like, that is absolutely broken. 0 mana, deal 4 damage to the face. So, as I said, this is one of my major points of contention. It's not just with him. Like I don't blame him for having this perspective. As he said himself, he played when he was a kid, stumbled back in, left for a while, came back in Ikoria. So he sees these big, burly creatures, but he doesn't remember, because he wasn't playing at the time, things like White's Academy or Broken Jar, or one of the trope cards on, or one of the meme cards on this channel is Jayemdae Tome. I absolutely adore Jayemdae Tome, which is a bad card by today's standards. It's a 4-mana artifact that you tap 4 mana and the tome, and you draw 1 card. 8 mana, 1 card, but it was repeatable and instant speed. So control decks would use that to slowly gain an advantage over the course of a game by using things like Forbid was a big one when I was a kid, because 3 mana counter spell and discard a card and you buy it back. There's an effect called buyback from the old sets that you would just pay an extra mana cost, an exorbitant mana cost, and you'd get it back. So you want to play Unsummon, that's cool. You want to play Unsummon for 6 mana, you can have it back in your hand. It was a way to develop card advantage. It was disgustingly broken, especially if you had ways to get the extra card to keep playing it over and over again. And Jayemdae Tome was one way. Ophidian was another popular way, which was a 3-mana 1/3 that when it dealt damage, you could prevent that damage to draw a card. And Force of Will was being played back when I was playing as a kid, which everyone knows Force of Will. Exile a card, counter a spell. Spells were really broken back then, and the creatures were crap. Now, you have things like Ragavan, Oko, Grist, Yawgmoth, very powerful creatures and planeswalkers, but your spells are kind of crap. Like, we fought for years to get Counterspell in Modern. 2 mana counter a spell. If you wanted something like Force of Will, it was 0 mana now, pay 5 mana before you've drawn your card for turn, or you lose the game next turn. That's the difference between back then and now. It's not power creep, just power shifting.
And then there was EDH. It was not a recognized format at the time, but whenever I would finish a tournament with my friends, we would all go out to Denny's and sit at a table till about 3 in the morning playing Commander. Again, this is before Wizards of the Coast officially recognized Commander as a format. This is before things like even the Wizard's Tower had been conceptualized back during the early days of Fat Packs. This is back when you could get the Magic the Gathering novels when you bought Fat Packs. Half the reason you bought a Fat Pack, a bundle, was because you got the novel.
That is true. Like, I used to love my novels when I was a kid. Invasion Block was my jam. Used to get this big box that would have the novel displayed, and it was amazing. I totally 100% agree that I bought plenty of Fat Packs when I was a kid so I could get that novel. And then they took the novel away, and I've been I refused to buy Fat Packs for a very long time because I was so bitter that they took away my novel.
Would hold on to them, but a lot of us would actually, read those things and enjoy things like the story of Ravnica as told from the perspective of Ardent Kos. Going forward, though, when I started playing Magic again, it was incredibly difficult for me because things like Arena had convinced me that the game I loved still existed. I still could get in a game of Magic the Gathering with standard rotated cards and walk into a tournament with those and have a good time. that really isn't the case anymore. Back when I was a kid, things like Commander were the side things you played after tournaments to cool down. Now, Commander is the main event.
This is another one of my problems with Magic nowadays. Is I was the guy that bought. I have VHS tapes of world championships. I love the competitive scene. Just watching, oh my God, it's Lightning Helix! And was Patrick Chapin and Gabriel Nassif and all right, roll the dice. Now when you flip it, you can't look, you can't peek. You gotta slam it. You gotta slam it. Oh my God! I loved those moments. I loved watching um, the Pro Tour. One of my following Patrick Chapin, who is my favorite pro, winning his way up to finally get his first Pro Tour win in Journey into Nyx. Watching um, Mike Long and Mark Justice in one of the most hilarious games at Pro Tour Paris in '97. Watching uh, Luis Scott Vargas playing his janky Golgari deck in a mono white format during the Shadows over Innistrad uh, Pro Tour, and watching him come out on top with the cheap, or come not on top. I think he got a just shy of top 8 with the cheapest deck in the top 32, where everyone else is playing Avacyn. He's playing Cryptolith right. I loved all of that, and it doesn't have that same kind of excitement anymore. It's not really as focused on. I still watch I watched Nationals, or was it the America? Was it yeah? Was it America Cup last year or year before last? Something, but it just doesn't have that same kind of power anymore. And you never know when it's going to happen. Where before you'd open your booster packs, and there would be advertisements in the pack that are like, be sure to watch Worlds at this day. We're going to do Pro Tour Barcelona on this day. Be sure to watch. Now, even Wizards of the Coast come out and said, we know Commander's the biggest thing, so that's all we really care about. Have fun, guys. So I agree with him completely on this point.
Things like Standard were considered to be the healthy format that everybody gravitated to, and now it's considered to be something that's slapdash. And
That I definitely disagree with. Standard has never been healthy. If you think that Standard was ever a healthy format, a low-powered, safe format, then I would like to introduce you to Necro Summer. I'd like to introduce you to White's Academy. I'd like to introduce you to Madness. I'd like to introduce you to Callblade. I'd love to introduce you to uh, Red Black Burn back in Amonkhet and Ixalan and Dominaria. I'd love to introduce you to Azorius Control during Dominaria Standard. I can go on forever about the best decks. He started in Mirrodin. This man started in Mirrodin. In Mirrodin, when you're playing Standard, there was only 2 decks you could play. Tooth and Nail, so that you would win like once in a blue moon, or Affinity, so you could get murdered in the mirror match. That was it.
not really cared for anywhere near as much as it used to be. And we get things like Bone Crusher Giant and Oko and Alrund's Epiphany. And I mean, they recently had to get rid of Meat Hook Massacre because, lo and behold, printing Liliana of the Veil and Sheoldred in the exact same set has somehow meant that mono black decks are infinitely more powerful in Standard. Who would have thought?
To be fair to Wizards, even the pros were saying Liliana the Veil is not a good card anymore. It's safer standard. Everyone thought Liliana the Veil was safer standard. It wasn't just like a silly thing from Wizards. Professionals said it's fine. And professionals still say Liliana is fine. She has not been the problem. They say Shieldred is part of the problem. But I've listened to several pros talk, and I have played this mono black deck, and I gotta say, it's no one individual card in that deck is a problem. It's a culmination of all the different answers and card advantage that were in it before the ban. And even after the ban, it still has a lot of play.
And I'm not saying that Standard was perfect back when I was playing. I grew up in the heyday of the original Jund decks, dropping Broodmate Dragons on people for ludicrous amounts of value. I'm not saying the game was in a super healthy state back then, but I am saying that we've had cards banned far more often nowadays with the current way that Wizards designs cards.
And No. It's not about the current way Wizards designs cards. It's because, and he said he came back for Ikoria, so it's understandable he hasn't heard about this yet. In 2016, Wizards said we're changing our banned and restricted policy. It's no longer about sheer power. It's about fun, which is very subjective. And it makes it to where cards get banned that have low win rates. I believe a good example of that is Aetherworks Marvel, one of the first fun bans. And it was banned, and I think it had like a 40% win rate. But 10% of the was it 1 in 10 chance is what I think I had heard the other day. So 1 in 10 chance that you'd spin the wheel and you would hit Ulamog. But 9 out of 10 times you'd spin the wheel, hit nothing, and durdle for a little while trying to get the energy back. Spin the wheel again, durdle, miss, whatever. I guess I lose. So I get what he's trying to say, and if you have more context because you've been in the Magic world for the last 6 years when it comes to this, then you know that the banning policy is no longer about power level. Sure, some things are banned for power level. Look at Oko. But more things are being banned because people don't enjoy playing against them. And it has nothing to do with power level. There have been so many cards that are so bad that are getting banned because they are unfun.
And I think a lot of this comes down to a higher focus on the Commander format. As a result, I've found myself not caring for Standard because the people around me don't care for Standard. I found myself gravitating towards Modern because that's really the only competitive format that I was able to play for the longest time until Pioneer was pushed more by Wizards. And even then, that's only being focused on because Wizards has pushed the format. And it's not like Pioneer is going to be absolved of any of the problems that Standard created. In fact, Standard legal cards are the things that make it into Pioneer. What's different about Modern? Because it used to be that the Type 1 format was where you played all your old busted cards. Well, now it's not where you play your old busted cards. It's where you play the new busted cards. Cards that are considered far too powerful for the Standard format get printed in Modern Horizons sets now. And it's not that I don't enjoy those sets. I started playing Modern in Modern Horizons too.
A couple very good points to make is he's right about sets being pushed. Since Guilds of Ravnica, we have seen Fire Design, which is where they're pushing power levels, which, you know what, I am perfectly fine with that. If you don't push power levels, you get Mercadian Masks, you get Kamigawa, you get Ixalan. Oh god, let me just throw up in my mouth a little bit. God, that set was horrible. I'll have to do a video on that one someday. And he is right that Modern Horizons 2 is being printed directly into Modern, and it's making a shakeup, which it's trying to. It's trying to be the standard version of, like, a standard set version of for Modern. So when a new set in Standard comes out, you usually have about a half dozen or a dozen cards that immediately make an effect on the format, and then you have 2 or 3 dozen more that get toyed around with and splashed around with in the set. So they were trying to make something powerful enough to where that happened, and it did. It buffed out a lot of decks that were tier 2, 2.5, or 3 and pushed them up to 1, 1.5, or 2. Did make a couple tier 0 decks. Hello, Hogak, how you doing? But in general, Modern Horizons 2 did what it was supposed to do, and I don't actually have an issue with Modern Horizons 2 having as big of an effect on Modern as it did, because that was the point.
So the only Modern format I've played is the format that exists with Ragavan and Darcy and Murktide Regent. That's the only Modern I've ever played.
He's actually kind of lucky about this, because I remember the Modern formats of, as Hogak, which is Modern Horizon 1. I remember Eldrazi Winter. I remember all of these busted, like, I actually am one of the people who pushes for Splinter Twin, but Splinter Twin is an insane deck. Birthing Pod was a card so good that it prevented Wizards from making better creatures. Like, that.
And it's astounding to me that version of Modern, despite my love for decks like Affinity and Hardened Scales, which work perfectly fine in that format, that the format's such a mess.
While it is a little bit of a mess, I'd like to point out that for the better part of Modern's time around, like, in existence, since it was announced, I'm wanting to say 2011 or 2012, when they extended and created Modern. Or it was earlier than that. It was like, when was the last extended tournament? Maybe it's been like 15 years now, and I'm just old. What were you saying again, Jesus?
He had 4-color Omnath dominating for a long-ass time, and before then we had 2-mana decks that were being dominated completely by things like Lurrus of the Dream Den, and these took forever for Wizards to remove from the game. Now, they still exist in other formats.
Yeah, when Affinity, the Modern players were begging for Affinity to get banned forever. Like, it was way too good, and you didn't hear people start talking about how Affinity was actually fair, or maybe not even good enough, or the point is today where it's a fringe tier 2, 2.5 deck. You didn't deal with any of that. Or what is it? And then what ended up making Tron go away? This absolutely broken deck that everyone hated to see, almost as much as Tron. Modern Horizons 2 came in and mixed up the format, changed it up, changed what was considered a stale format.
Yeah, obviously, but this brings us back to the standard format. Modern Horizons may have brought us our Murktide Regents, our Ragavans, and our Darcys, but the cards that have enabled the format to become such a problem are not just in Modern Horizons. This all loops back onto that standard product. Standard is supposed to be the set
Fair.
that is lower power by comparison to some of the things that have existed in the past, at the very least by volume. But that's not really what has happened. Things like the companion mechanic, which really doesn't belong in Magic the Gathering at all, by my estimation, maintain a foothold in several formats. Commander, I'm less concerned about because
The thing about Companion was Wizards of the Coast trying to bring the Commander, like it's supposed to be a present to the Commander players to play that played Standard. Hey, you want to play Standard? You want to play some competitive formats? Here you go. You still get to have a Commander. Enjoy your day. Like, that was what it was supposed to be, and it came out absolutely god awful. But that does go back to the idea that Wizards knows Commander is their bread and butter. That's where they're making their money.
while I have my issues with how the rules committee handles bans in Commander, things like saying that Gaia's Cradle won't be banned in Commander because it's budget restrictive, and then Wizards prints proxies, and now there's not a budget restriction to things like Gaia's Cradle, because why not just proxy a Gaia's Cradle? Well, the rules committee said that it would be banned if there wasn't a budget restriction. Well, if you're playing with proxies, there is no budget restriction, so should you play with Gaia's Cradle? Ignoring that whole circular argument, I'm not too concerned about the Commander format for this.
I actually agree with him here that I think that the rules committee for Commander, it has a lot of things that it desperately needs to like figure out. Because talking about how Gaia's Cradle is fine because it's budget restrictive, they said that they banned things like Black Lotus and Time Walk in those cards, not because they were too good. They banned them because the price was too restrictive. And then they say that Gaia's Cradle is fine because it's budget restrictive. I find that weird. Like, I'm one of the people that's for unbanning I don't like things being banned. I especially don't like things being banned because the card is too expensive. But that's another video altogether. But I do agree with him completely. The Commander Rules Committee is so many kinds of, like, that's a whole can of worms that maybe I'll cover one day.
My concerns are with the health of the game. It feels to me that Wizards of the Coast, when I was younger, cared more about creating a game that encapsulated chess. Chess as expressed through a collectible card game. You could get two well-built decks, sit across the table from each other, and perform decently well. Now it seems like either by a combination of things like MTG Goldfish homogenizing several strategies, or the fact that Wizards is printing so many more powerful cards these days, it seems like it's harder and harder to build your own decks. It seems like it's more and more difficult to come up with any strategy that will function in a tournament setting that is not just the tried and true ones. And I know people like Spike have gone on to Twitch and have shown that there are other strategies that can work. Professional players can still brew in this format, but I don't think that actually matters. My reason being is 90% of Magic players are not professional players. 90% of Magic players are some form of casual, even if they have a powerful modern or standard deck that they go into competitive tournaments with. They are still not professional players by the strictest sense. They are still people who are playing the game for fun with their friends and at tournaments. I'm not saying that.
Okay, this goes back to what I said before. I actually grew up in, like, when I first started playing, I got to start playing in probably the healthiest Magic the Gathering format of all time, Exodus Standard. Now, at the Pro Tour that Exodus Standard was in, you had Rexer, you had Mono Blue, Mono Blue Control. You had Forbidian. You had Frostbloom, the very first combo deck. You had Burn. What else was there? Oh, White Weenie. The only thing's certain is that the next tournament, or is it Death Taxes, and someone's bringing White Weenie to the next tournament. Like, these are, like, that was the healthiest standard, and I listed off 6 decks. Besides that, like, there was the Caw-Blade time where you played Caw-Blade or you lost. The standard Caw-Blade deck was being played in Legacy. There was the aforementioned Affinity standard, where you played Affinity, or for a little while you could play Astral Slide, but then Astral Slide cycled out, and if you played against anything that was not Affinity, Astral Slide was moderate at best. It was a deck that was designed specifically to stop Affinity because of how Affinity worked and what you're trying to do what you had to do in order to stop Affinity from functioning. So, there's the Tricks Extended deck where you played Tricks or you lost. There was the Pickles Extended where you played Pickles or you lost. There was what are some other? There are times in Modern where you played some variation of Bridge from Below or you lost, or Vengevine or you lost. In Legacy, there was a time where you either played Rex or you played Survival Combo, Survival Aggro, Survival Combo, Aggro, or Control. There was, as I said, Necro Summer. There was Hazored. There was Crazy Cat Lady for a little while, where you used Saheeli Rai and Felidar Guardian to make an infinite combo on turn 4. And then had a shell around it that was so good that after they banned Crazy Cat Lady, that shell became the only way you could win in Standard for a little while. There are so many points where you can point directly at one deck and say, you play this one deck, or you play these 2 decks, or you will lose. This is not something new. This is part of the package of playing Standard. And now if you're playing casual, I'll get into that here in a bit because he's going to continue.
Net decking is bad. Net decking is a thing that exists in any and all formats. of any and all card games. It's almost a necessary evil when only a
If you want to be a
handful of
net
cards are
decker, that's
printed with the
perfectly
absurd
fine.
power levels
Casual or
required to
competitive, I don't
function within
care.
any given format.
You want to be a brewer? That's cool too.
Net decking becomes a necessity to keep up. Not everybody can spend the time it takes learning how to brew a proper deck and then playing that proper deck to begin with.
I agree with them there 100%. No critiques. Good on you. Some people just don't have the time to do the brewing, and that is completely understandable. If you want to play and net deck your way to doing well at Friday Night Magic, I do not fault you for that. It takes a lot of time and effort to brew your own deck, especially in some of our more broken standards.
What I'm saying is, Magic the Gathering, the game I grew up with, the game that was a brewer's paradise, the game that had a competitive standard rotating circuit that people paid attention to and people enjoyed, that game is kind of dead.
This right here is what really got me to respond to this video, because Standard has never been a brewer's paradise in the way that he's talking about, which he should know because, as I said, he started in Mirrodin Standard. The standard that had to emergency ban during the next set Skullclamp, that had to ban the 5 artifact lands, that had to just ban the crap out of Affinity until it finally was weakened enough to where you could potentially, possibly play something else. But this is only if you're playing competitively. He said that when he was young, he would play with friends. Maybe he went down to his LGS. And if you're doing that, Standard is still to this day a brewer's paradise. I've seen all sorts of crazy things people are doing with LSL Core, or some of the fun vampire decks or werewolf decks I've actually seen people build wacky things with. I've seen vehicle decks that have been played that I think are so cool, but none of these are like would be considered tier 1. Standard to this day is still a brewer's paradise, but there are 2 big differences between when he and I were kids and now. One of which, the internet is more widely used. See, when we were kids, if you wanted to know what the best deck was, you had to wait for the Pro Tour, or you had to wait for Worlds, and then see what the pros were playing, and see who won, and who they were matched up against, what their strongest matches were, what their weakest matches were. Did they get lucky and get their way up there? Because you don't want to go out of your way to trade off half of your collection to build a deck because your LGS doesn't have the singles, and then find out you traded into a deck that lucked its way into the top 8 or top 4 or a win. Like, I can't imagine how many people after the first Pro Tour bought Gruul Spiders, which was a god awful deck, probably the worst deck to ever win any tournament. So that makes it to where, because the internet is more widely used, we are solving formats at a record pace. When you have 20 million people jump into a single format and all hammer away at it, you will find out what the best deck is in a matter of days instead of a matter of months. And number 2, because we have Arena that's allowing everyone to play competitively, you don't really see, let me put it this way, you don't really see wacky brews when you're sitting at home playing Arena. Like before, when I was a kid, to play Magic, we would play like once or twice during the school week, and then maybe one night on the weekend with friends. You would play like maybe a grand total of 5 or 6 rounds of Magic over the course of a week. Whereas now, I can knock that out in less than an hour on Arena. So the way that we experience Magic is changing, but the game itself still has all of the same problems, just amplified because of how we consume it. So that's where I think that he is right. Magic has changed, but not because of power creep and building for Commander. It has to do with how we consume Magic, how we experience it with each other with the invention of the internet, and the focus on more casual formats over the competitive formats. And so Standard is as much a brewer's paradise now as it was 20, 25 years ago. The thing is, it's as much of a brewer's paradise as it was 20, 25 years ago. We just experience it in such a unique way now compared to then that it feels like less of a brewer's paradise. Even though if you go play with your friends, I guarantee you, if you all say we're going to buy a booster box each and crack that booster box, and we can only play with the cards that we open in our booster box, you will find some wacky, awesome stuff that is standard. And you'll have fun. And that's why I say it's still just as much of a brewer's paradise. It just is experienced differently.
And I'm not saying that it's better or worse now. The Brewer's Paradise components I enjoyed from Magic in the past are now basically in the Commander format. So I still have my way of playing the game I love. And the competitive aspects of Magic that I cared about before are now mostly relegated to the Pioneer and the Modern formats. And I don't hate Modern. I enjoy what it is as it stands. I guess I'm more lamenting the fact that we've come to this stage in the first place. A game that shouldn't have experienced power creep the way that it has because of rotation that should have made power creep less
As I already said, power shifting, not power creep.
relevant because it has the ability to take overpowered cards and move them out of its format, is experiencing power creep still. And Wizards of the Coast is incentivized to continue that power creep because it's not like standard cards become less relevant when they rotate. When I was younger, standard cards lost their value as soon as they rotated. Now, they maintain their value due to the proximity of the Commander's, Modern, and Pioneer formats. Because
As an investor, he's 100% right about this. There's a thing that started talking about because Rudy pointed out back in 2017 that now that you have Commander is holding up the value of these singles as they rotate out. There's some cards that actually go up after rotation because of Commander.
cards do not lose their value anymore. Players are still incentivized to seek out those cards. Wizards is still incentivized to print those cards at higher and higher power, as opposed to just building cards for lower power levels, knowing that they are going to rotate out anyway, and letting mistakes of the past exist in the past.
Once again, if you don't believe that, if you don't believe me about um, Magic today being about like on the same level as Magic 25 years ago in standard, then I invite you to take your standard deck and play against Rexer or Prosbloom and see how well your deck performs. You'll find it's at about the same power level.
I'm of the firm opinion that you can have exciting and fun cards printed into this format without having another Lurrus of the Dream Den or another Oko. I'm a firm believer that you can have strong cards printed in a format that people will gravitate to and
Lurrus and Oko are aberrations, but I do actually agree with him there that those cards legitimately were a they were creeping up to the power level of some Alpha Arabian Night, Alpha and four Alpha Beta Unlimited Four Horsemen power level, which that was when Magic was at its absolute pinnacle of power within a set.
enjoy without relying on things like Me Took Massacre, which in a bubble isn't really the worst thing in the world, and in fact is a wonderful piece for aristocrat decks in Commander, but gets out of hand when you think of the amount of value engines a mono black deck can push out in Standard right now.
I agree with
The
him
game I
100% on
love
that as
is,
well.
kinda dead. And I don't know if the game that exists right now is better or worse. I'm still going to keep playing it, and I do enjoy it, and I'm even starting a channel to talk about it because this is a game that means a lot to me. It hasn't meant as much to me in the past, but it does now, because Magic is how I get out of the house. It's how I socialize. It's how I experience having time with friends. It's become a lot more important to me in recent years.
And that's good
So I'm
for
going to
him.
be
That's what
dedicating my
Magic's
time
all
to
about,
it.
the gathering.
But I'm also not going to sugarcoat my opinions about what the company that created a game that I grew up with and a game that I love. I'm not going to sugarcoat my opinions on that company, and I'm not going to sugarcoat my opinions on the product they make. That
That's
said,
fair enough.
I guess this is a long-ass preamble into saying I am starting a Magic the Gathering channel, and this is the first video going up on that channel. If you want to subscribe to it, I would absolutely love having you on here. I normally do political content on my main channel, but for those who don't want to deal with that, I have 2 other channels where you can still watch me and the stuff that I do. I'm splitting the Nekosaurus channel that I normally do all of my dump content on into a card game channel and a video game channel respectively. If you're watching this video, you have found yourself on the card game side of my channel. That said, I do want to thank you for watching this video. I know it's a lot more somber than I want to be, and I plan on making more uplifting and fun content in the future. But for now, thank you for hearing at least one random-ass VTuber's opinion on this game on the internet. I really do appreciate it. And if you are watching still, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Let me know how this game has changed for you, and if there was any culture shock for you. And as always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here.
I'm not going to leave that up. But as I said, that I think I've explained my opinions on the difference between Magic 20, 25 years ago and Magic now. And he did make a lot of very good points, especially. I just think that even though he does have a good perspective on many aspects of the way Magic is nowadays, especially in regards to how it's shifted so hard towards Commander and away from the more mainstream competitive formats. I think he is spot on. I think he's 100% right, and I'm not here to tell you that absolutely everything in this video is wrong. As a matter of fact, most of the stuff he said in this video was not like he was either 100% dead on the money or slightly off, and I think that that's slightly off is mostly because of rose tinted glasses. Um, as I said, as someone who's been here, as someone who loves the history of competitive Magic, who has lived that, like, loved and lived that life, the lore, the collecting, the pro scene, the investing, who's delved his life into Magic as hard as I have. When I hear a lot of these claims, I have to point out that nostalgia's taken over his perspective. He's the equivalent of a person saying, back in my day, um, politicians were noble and children respected their elders. And I'm not going to fault him for that, but I would like to correct the more egregious points that I think that he was wrong on. It mostly because I think that he was casual for as he said, when is it when he played as a kid, Standard was a Brewer's Paradise. Now he's grown up and he thinks that Standard is no longer a Brewer's Paradise, but Commander is. The thing that playing Standard as a kid and playing Commander today have in common, they're both casual formats. He's played casual for a long time, and he's now seeing the difference between casual and hyper competitive because of things like Arena. But overall, as I said, I think he made a lot of very good points. I agree with him on several things, and once again, I would like to welcome him into our Magic the Gathering family. And I have personally liked this video and subscribed to his channel. And I hope to see more from Cirrus in the for many years to come. All right, I'm Rukak. This is Jam Day Warehouse. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We have had record growth in the last couple of weeks. I guess the algorithm gods have smiled upon me. But until next time, have yourselves a good evening.